Hello, Yankee fans, and welcome to the Pinstriped Prospects Podcast brought to you by Velocity 5 Sports Restaurant and Bar in Sterling, Virginia. My name is Tommy Romanelli, and I'm going to be your host for tonight for the 38th edition of our podcast. As you can see, our usual host and amazing host, Rob Terranova, is not with us tonight. So I will be taking over the reins, and I hope to be able to fill in for his shoes and live up to his reputation. However, we do have a very special show for you tonight. My hosting is not the only panel shakeup. We have a few new people on, and we have another regular. So I'm going to get right to it and start introducing those guys. First up, we have our podcast regular and Charleston River Dogs reporter, Joseph Dixon. How you doing tonight, Joe?
Oh, I'm doing great, Tommy. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too, man. You too. And we also have a newcomer to the podcast, first-timer, and a guy who has been doing a phenomenal job for Pinstripe Prospects since he joined us just a few short months ago, Ricky Keeler. How you doing tonight, Ricky?
Doing great, Tommy. Happy to be here, and happy to be a part of the Pinstripe Podcast family.
Welcome, sir. Welcome. And then finally, another special guest, a man that needs no introduction and has been on the podcast before, but not in a while. Our all-star beat reporter for the Trenton Thunder, Matt Kardos. How you doing, Matt?
How you doing, Tommy? It's been a long time coming. Glad to be back on talking some Yankee baseball with you guys.
Yeah, for sure, man. So we have a lot to get to tonight. For a quiet week, there was a lot of minor things that happened, but of course we need to discuss that at length. So I'm just going to get right to it. The first thing that I wanted to bring up was that two prospects in the Yankee system, both with kind of a questionable place in the farm system, are over in the winter leagues, and they're absolutely raking. The first one is Ryan McBroom. He's a guy that, we should all be at least a little bit familiar with. He came over in the Rob Refsnyder trade last year from the Toronto Blue Jays. McBroom is currently playing for the Tomateros de Culiacan, and I do apologize if I'm butchering that name. But he hit .318 with 5 home runs, 18 RBIs, and actually played in 30 games. And the second player is a player that most people aren't probably too familiar with, but somebody we have talked about recently, and that's Jabari Blash. For those of you who don't know, Blash came over in the trade with the Padres for Chase Headley. So I'm just going to start this right off. We had a story on the Pinstripe Prospects website, and that was written by Ricky Keeler himself. So Ricky, I'm going to start with you on this. Both of those players are most likely ticketed for AAA. McBroom might even see time at AA to start the year. But those guys, they're mashing right now. So do you see them having a role with the Yankees in the upcoming season at all?
Tommy, it's really tough to see both those guys having significant roles, just because I think the Yankees have built up depth at those positions, whether you go to first base. Even if Greg Bird has the same injury concerns, you still have Tyler Austin, who has his own injury concerns, but the Yankees hope he's a big contributor this year. And Billy McKinney, learning to play first base in the Arizona Fall League, I think could lead him to getting promoted first. And then with Jabari Blash in the outfield, you have Aaron Hicks, you have Jay Cave, who hopefully will get a chance at some point in the major leagues. The Jacoby Ellsbury situation, which we'll get into later. And the Yankees have so much depth in the outfield to begin with. It's tough to see. It's good to see both those guys hitting for power. They're the only two with 5 home runs in Winter League. And the Yankees, I think, after those two guys, nobody's hit more than 1. But McBroom strikes out a lot. And you look at Blash, he did a good job in El Paso working a lot of walks. And that's a league that's really familiar with the home runs. At least he's good at working the count, staying patient, and getting on base in addition to the home runs. So maybe he's got a better shot than McBroom, but I don't really see where either of those guys fit, barring a whole bunch of injuries.
And that's one thing that actually stuck out to me because, the one thing I've noticed in the past is that the Yankees have really valued guys that can get on base. And recently, guys who could get on base and hit bombs. So, I mean, in your opinion, do you feel like that does give him the inside track, that plus his major league experience, over a guy like McBroom.
Definitely, especially on a win now team, if you have a guy that has that experience and can hit the ball out of the ballpark, especially at Yankee Stadium, to take that. And he also strikes out a little bit less than McBroom. So I think while strikeouts are not as frowned upon now, you still have to take that into account when looking at those two players.
Yeah, for sure. And now I want to toss it over to Joe, because you're a regular here, so I do want to know, how do you feel like they'll fit in with the team this year?
So, yeah, I think both players, obviously, of course, are insurance policies. You never know with Greg Bird, especially with his injury troubles. So, that could open the door for, like, McBroom to potentially get a shot in there. But I would see him more spending the time with in AAA with Scranton this year rather than, seeing time at the big club. Blash, he's kind of an interesting prospect. He does have some power. He has some speed. He plays the corner outfield positions. He's an interesting player in that he did have some time with the Padres. Of course, you wonder, since it is the Padres, how valuable that time was. But he did have, a little bit of time up with the major league. So if, again, with the crowded outfield situation, I don't know if he'll actually get a real shot. But if, there are a couple of injuries, then at least they have that insurance policy sitting in Scranton waiting to come up.
Yeah, and now alluding to what you said, with his major league experience, when the Yankees were going up and down with Luis Severino, to try to get him right again, not last year, the year before, the one thing that I heard, and I actually completely agreed with this, and I feel it could apply to Blash too on the hitter side, is that even if they put Severino in the bullpen, that was so much more valuable to him and the team for his development, just because, so if he's working on a changeup, the AAA guys are going to swing and miss at that changeup, even if they're bad, just because they're still in development as well. So you have, maybe with Blash being able to work on some things at the major league level and see major league pitching, that sped up his development a little bit. So that could definitely be a factor for him this year. But focusing on McBroom a little bit, he spent his time in AA when he came over to the Yankees midseason last year, where Matt, you got a chance to see him. Based off of what you saw, do you think that he would be able to have an impact at the major league level? And do you feel like even with his numbers that he's putting up now, he'd even be ready for that this season?
To answer the second part of that, I don't think the numbers necessarily that he's putting up in the Winter League would translate to the big league level, just based on what I've seen him up to this point. Obviously, he came over from the Blue Jays system, he was with New Hampshire, actually was in Trenton when he got traded already, so he only had to kind of go across the hallway and switch clubhouses the day he got dealt. But I was impressed with him before the Yankees got him. He's a guy that kind of stood out to me, and watching him play a lot with New Hampshire. So the power's obviously there. That's his bread and butter. Guy's a dead pull hitter. He doesn't really go anywhere other than the field. He's pretty much a dead pull hitter. Strikes out a lot. But it's hard to argue with the numbers that he's put up. He's not going to hit for a high average. I think he's probably a 250 guy at best if he plays at the big league level. I don't think his ceiling's much higher than that. But he does strike out a ton. And I don't know that gets any better the higher up he goes. It's just kind of a trend that's been with him since he's gotten drafted. The interesting thing about him is, though, you look at him and you look at his age, and he's an older guy. I think he's 24 now, but he's a 4-year college guy. So he's only been in pro ball for 2 full seasons now. He's been the MVP of 2 leagues that he's played in. Had monster power numbers in the Florida State League, where you don't normally see a lot of power numbers there. So the guy has definitely put up some numbers that kind of, you have to pay attention to them. You can't ignore them. He's definitely an interesting guy. I think a lot of things at the big league level would have to go terribly wrong for him to get a chance at the big league level this year. But I definitely think he has some tools that would obviously pose an interest to a big league club. I think he definitely needs more time to kind of season that. And he's going to have to improve the plate discipline more than anything, though, to kind of get that opportunity if it ever comes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree with that completely, and that's kind of why I thought it was interesting that they both were kind of, looped into that story because they're both in the same situation. If you think about it, plate discipline is probably what they both need. And they also have like 4 or 5 guys in front of them for them to actually make a difference at the major league level. But it's definitely a good point. And one thing reading Ricky's story that came to my mind was, how much depth does this organization actually have at first base? Tyler Austin is probably the first man up if Greg Bird got hurt, but he does have his injury history of his own. So behind him, you lost G-Man Choi the other day to the Brewers, so he's gone. Right now, Mike Ford is with the Mariners, and he was a Rule 5 pick. He most certainly could still come back, but if he doesn't, then the guy behind him is probably Billy McKinney, who's brand new at the position. So McBroom might actually end up seeing time closer if everything goes wrong. But I just thought that was an interesting point there. So
I do think though, the thing is, I think if it got to the point where all those contingencies failed ahead of McBroom, say Bird gets hurt and Austin gets hurt, which they've both done, that wouldn't be a surprise if it happened again. And maybe they're not comfortable giving it to McKinney, or they don't want to go in that direction. I think the Yankees would probably kind of maybe swing a deal like they did last year for a guy like a Garrett Cooper or something like that, somebody who's more ready to contribute in somebody else's system, or maybe swing a deal for like a veteran guy to come in there and play the position before they turn it into McBroom. So that's obviously a scenario that's always in play too. So
yeah, absolutely. And another option too is they could try Andujar over there, only because I know that when he was in Trenton and when he was in Scranton, he did get some time at during practice trying that out. So that could be another option for them. But let's all hope for the best that Greg Bird could just hold down the position for the year and you don't have to worry about that. But moving along here, some other Yankee news, again, minor, but in the context of things, major. The Yankees avoided arbitration with all of their players. They signed all of them. And just to read down the list here, they signed Dellin Betances to a $5.1 million deal. Didi Gregorius, $8.25 million. Sonny Gray, $6.5 million. Aaron Hicks, $2.825 million. Tommy Kahnle, $1.3125 million. You really negotiated that one down. Adam Warren got $3.325 million, and then Austin Romine, $1.1 million. And also Jason Shreve got $825,000. So usually not big news, but last year, as everybody knows, there was a little bit of drama between Dellin Betances and the Yankees. They couldn't settle, among $2 million. Now, when I first heard that story, I was a little taken aback because I was thinking, a player of Dellin's caliber, why are you really starting this over $2 million? Just cut it down the middle and go from there. But it seemed like it was something that was a precursor for the rest of the season with him. He seemed to have some trouble with his command, obviously, and it seemed like him and Girardi had a few go-betweens during the season. So my question is, do you feel like that could be behind Dellin and the Yankees now that there's new management in? And also, do you feel like the arbitration system, it could maybe use a few tweaks so that you don't have players that are going to be on the roster for a few years, fighting with their teams? I'm going to start with Joe on that one. What's your opinion there?
Just to start with Dellin Betances settling and getting this whole thing out of the way, I think the fact that they settled is a good sign, and that all parties have set aside their differences, and Betances can now focus on baseball. Ironically, of course, it's for the same salaries as he signed for, or he wanted last year and couldn't get. I think that it's good that they settled before the hearing and avoided that whole situation again. And there was quite a good article in late December in the Post by George King where Dellin Betances was very upbeat. He was talking about becoming a key part of the next championship and getting these mechanics together, which he thinks has been the reason why he's kind of faltered over the last 2 seasons down the stretch. So I think with all things said and done, it's good that they got this out of the way early, and he got the money that he wanted, and the two parties can move on and then try to go out there and focus on baseball. As far as the arbitration system, I do kind of agree with you that it needs to be fixed. Having the players and teams battle year after year and bring up stuff during arbitration that causes hurt feelings. I mean, think about Derek Jeter still holds some angst over the way he was treated during one of his arbitration hearings. So it's something that Major League Baseball should look at and maybe try to kind of push toward a system whereas it creates more long-term contracts and not this year after year fighting.
Yeah, definitely. In my opinion, I feel like there's a better way to go about that. The player is forced to be under control regardless, based off of the arbitration system. So to argue over what little amount of money that ends up being in the grand scheme of things, I feel like they could definitely do something better with that. Now, tossing it over to Matt, how do you feel about that? A lot of these players too, you've probably seen at your level and then now going through that. So what's your feeling on that?
Yeah, I kind of echo the same sentiments as Joe on the issue all around. Obviously, it's a plus to get any kind of issues that you may have with Dellin out of the way early after the circus that it caused last year. Kind of like you alluded to last year, it just seemed like that hung over him the entire season. To go into the season, obviously that was a huge story, and everybody kind of made a big deal about it. And he kind of made it known that it was an issue in him that he was going to kind of look past, but it just seemed like it kind of carried a chip on his shoulder all year long. Obviously, and as the season went along, he didn't really pitch all that well. And it seemed as the season went on, he kind of spiraled to the point of almost no return to where he wasn't even pitchable in the postseason. So I think now you're going in with a new manager. You want to go in having him as clear as possible in terms of stuff going through his head. You're going to want to maximize what you can get out of him. So any outside distractions that you could eliminate and let him focus solely on baseball and getting his command down and getting back to the Dellin Betances that we've seen pitch at an all-star level, I think is the main goal. So it's good that they got this out of the way. I think he's pitched well enough to deserve that, like you said, minimal amount of money that he's asking for. I think his resume has certainly earned that. So it's good they got that out of the way. As far as the arbitration process goes, I too agree with Joe. I think it's silly. It comes down to the fact that you almost have a team devaluing the guy that they're trotting out there every day. It's almost giving them a reason to not pay them. Oh, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. These numbers aren't necessarily worth this amount of money. And it's almost like, I kind of carried you to the postseason last year, and you're telling me I'm not worth $2 million. It gives the guys every reason to carry hurt feelings. And if it comes down to it, when they hit free agency and they're going to negotiate with other teams, if you treat a guy well and give him that $2 million that he's looking for 3 years before he hits free agency, maybe he gives you the benefit of the doubt when he goes into free agency a couple years down the line. So, you never want to burn a bridge, especially with a guy that you developed, a young guy like that came up through the system. I just think there's got to be a better way, maybe a way to independently figure out the salary where the teams aren't actually battling or negotiating against each other. Maybe have a private arbitrator just decide what their salary is going to be for that season based on the numbers that they've put up, service time, stuff like that. It would have to obviously go through a whole bunch of boards and approvals and stuff like that. The players union and all that would have to approve stuff, but I think there's got to be a more practical system than to have a player and a valued asset battle against the team that's kind of paying him and showcasing him moving forward. It's really silly.
Yeah. And I 100% agree with that. And that was my thought too, was have a private arbitrator. Don't even let the player and the team negotiate. Let that person set the standard and go from there. However, I do feel like it was very important for Dellin to be able to sign that quickly and be able to focus on his next season. After the season that the Yankees had, I think that, he's probably pumped up to get started and play on this team that should be exciting to watch this year and be a part of it. So, that's definitely, I think, important to this point. Now, Ricky, did you want to add anything to that?
I think I just want to go off what both of those guys have said, and I think the key for Dellin Betances in 2018 is confidence. I mean, Matt talked about it. You had a guy that was coming in extra innings in the Indians game, and it was game 2, when he's a guy you normally bring in for the 8th inning. And you have David Robertson, who we don't know if he's going to be on the team next year, depending on what the Yankees decide to do with payroll. Chad Green might go to the rotation. They still have Tommy Kahnle, but you need a guy that is established in the 8th inning to put with next to Aroldis Chapman. So they need Betances to be as confident as possible. He's a guy that feeds off that confidence because it ties him to his command. So anything that can make Dellin Betances happy is what the Yankees should have in their best interest, not trying to worry about who gets the win in arbitration. Because sometimes you see these hearings get decided over $200,000, and these teams make millions and millions and millions of dollars. It's kind of useless to go to a hearing over $200,000 sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, it'll be nice to know that it's all behind everything. And something worth noting, the Yankees did fall below what they were expected to use expected to spend in arbitrations. So they do have slightly more money. So that could be nice if they sign another guy or two going forward, as the luxury tax is going to be important. Now, speaking of signing a few more guys, I will move on here a bit. So there was some news out this week. The Yankees signed Dominican shortstop Angel Rojas. Rojas, not a splashy signing. He was an international free agent. The signings of Rainford Salinas and Antonio Cabello were definitely splashier, but the most notable thing about Rojas was that he was one of the 13 players that got released from the Braves because of their misconduct the last few years with the international system. So that's one guy that the Yankees were able to get for him. They were able to sign him to a $350,000 bonus. But what's interesting about that is for these Brave players, anything over $200,000 is all that counts towards their $3.5 million when it comes to their international free agent spending. So for the Yankees, they only are accounting for $150,000 of that towards their cap. So again, not much to say on Rojas, but he was a cheap signing, and maybe he might turn into something for the team. The Yankees also signed, a veteran pitcher, left-handed pitcher, Weibull Blanc. Wade is 33 years old. He is, Wade is 33 years old, and he was signed to a minor league free agent deal. He's a left-handed pitcher, and he was given an invite to spring training. He does have an opt-out that he actually has 2 opt-outs that come before the season starts, and he could also opt out in June 15th. He spent the 2015 season in Japan, and he pitched in 2016 for the Pirates and the Mariners. In 2017, he did pitch solely for the Pirates, and he pitched to a 4.50 ERA in 68 innings. Now, LeBlanc, doesn't seem to have an immediate spot on the team, probably more ticketed for as AAA insurance. However, he does have a chance to be the Yankees' long reliever coming into spring training, a shot to win that job. If somebody like Chad Green ends up getting a spot in the rotation, then his role of being long man / middle innings guy is definitely vacated and up for grabs. So, I'll throw this to Joe first. How do you see this shaking out for Weibull Blanc?
Well, LeBlanc, I mean, he does have experience, obviously, out of the bullpen, and you can always. The old expression is that you can never have enough left-handed pitching. So it's a depth signing. It's not for very much, not too much money. So it'll be interesting to see if he does break camp with the Yankees because with all the guys and all the arms in the system, it'll be. Fun to see if he makes the team because there's a lot of competition there, and he put up okay numbers. I mean, not great, not horrible. So he could have a role in the team, and it's you can't count him out. So it's a good signing by the Yankees. It's a depth signing. I don't think he's going to stick around if he doesn't win a job, though. I think he will opt out. That's just usually what you see with guys who've been around. And he'll go try to find a job somewhere else. But, if he makes the team, then it's a good depth signing.
Yeah, and I think he's ticketed for AAA. Again, as you said, depth. But the one thing that stood out to me was that, the Yankees don't have many left-handers now. They were a team that's always really coveted lefties, and now they're a bullpen without them, which always surprised me. So at first, when I saw this signing, I was thinking to myself, maybe he could be a nice piece out of the bullpen for a left-handed matchup. But he is better against righties than he is lefties. So it's definitely going to be fascinating to see how that would shake out, although I feel like the Yankees view him more as a starter as opposed to a reliever and, as an emergency option. So do you have anything to add to that one, Ricky?
Well, also to add to your point on the whole righties versus lefties thing, 7 of the 10 home runs that LeBlanc gave up this past season were to right-handed hitters, but he also had about a over 5 ERA in the second half, and the opponent still only hit .216. I think you have to like the fact that he's a 5-pitch pitcher. He doesn't rely on his fastball. It's only average about 87 according to Fangraphs, and he gets about a ground ball rate 46% of the time. So depending on how the Yankees line up that middle infield and who plays second base, I think that can be extremely important. Plus, I think you also have to consider, like you said, being in an opportunity to be a left-hander in the middle relief if you can win the job. But also, the Yankees are kind of that perfect team to sign that minor league deal, the spring training invite, because there's always the Scranton shuttle. Even if you don't make the team out of major league camp, you still have an opportunity if somebody gets hurt or the Yankees need a spot, you can come up and make an impact that way. So, see as more minor league invites come in because the Yankees, this is really the first one and we're in mid-January, but there's still an option for him, and I think maybe he does stick around and takes a chance on riding the shuttle up to the Bronx in early April, early May, around that time frame.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And with as many open spots as they actually have, with second and third and possibly the rotation in the bullpen, I wouldn't be surprised to see them bring in a lot more invites to spring training. So we'll see how that shakes out. Now, one of the perks of following our website and our social medias, which I also suggest you do, as well as I would like to remind everybody watching and listening that we are currently in the middle of unveiling our top 75 Pinstriped Prospects prospect list. And though that list comes with profiles for each player on that list written by all of our writers, so check out our social media pages, check out our website, pinstripeprospects.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So that's definitely something that you're going to want to look, because there's a lot of good information in there. And what's nice about that is a lot of those profiles were written by guys who have been able to see and actually be there and scout these players themselves. So you're getting firsthand knowledge and firsthand experience on these players that you're going to be reading the profiles for. So it's definitely a worthwhile read. So the other thing, that comes with having writers at each level and people watching is we get the firsthand takes on that. So that being said, today we have our Trenton Thunder writer here with us. So I'm going to turn this over to Matt for a second here. This is something we talked about on the podcast a few weeks ago, but since you're here, I would like to get your take on it. The Thunder have a new manager, Jay Bell. So I just want to know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's an exciting time. for the Thunder to get a new manager here as they go into their 25th season. They're hosting the All-Star game this year. I mean, they have a lot of cool stuff lined up. So to come in with a new young manager that I think the Yankees have a lot of faith in, and I think they have big plans for moving forward. Just judging on the hiring of him last year, throwing him up to high A with kind of moving him up with this group now. It'll be cool to kind of work with another manager after working with Bobby Mitchell for the last 2 years and kind of developing a close relationship with him. It's funny because the Thunder had Tony Franklin around for so many years, I think from 2007 all the way up till 2014. And in the minor leagues, you don't really see managers stick around at a level these days for more than a year or two, maybe 3 max, before they either go to another organization, get a big league job somewhere. So, I mean, we grew so accustomed to having the same manager all that time. And then kind of Al Padrique came in 2015, and then we've had Bobby Mitchell here the last 2 years. So it'll be interesting to see the style that he plays. I've obviously never been around him as far as a manager. I could remember back to my younger days when I started following baseball and remember him being an all-star type player for the Diamondbacks at the end of his career and with the Pirates before that. So it's definitely cool to have a guy who has major league experience and has been an all-star and played in World Series. Actually was part of that Diamondbacks team that beat Mariano Rivera in the 2001 World Series. So it'll be cool to have him around, kind of pick his brain, and he could give a unique perspective having played in the major leagues. I've talked to a couple players who started the year down in Tampa for him last year and then later came up to Trenton and played for Bobby Mitchell. And both are fans of both of them, but they say they're totally different managers in the way that they go about their styles and the way they approach the game. Polar opposites of each other from what I've heard. So I'm super interested to see the way that Jay Bell goes about his business and the way he runs a clubhouse and kind of implements a game plan. From what I hear, he's more of a kind of hands-on, in-your-face, high-energy type guy where I've gotten to know Bobby. He's more of a laid-back Southern California guy, kind of lets the players go as they will and runs a really aggressive style on the field and pushes small ball and likes to push the bunt and taking the extra base and kind of putting pressure on the pitcher. So definitely interested to see what kind of style is going to bring to this next core of players in Trenton here in 2018.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that I wanted to bring up too, and again, this is something we've talked about in the past, but you kind of mentioned it before, how before Bobby Mitchell was Padrique, then Padrique moved up, and then Bobby Mitchell went to Trenton. So do you feel like the transition for a guy like Jay Bell is much easier because he's had some experience with the players that will already be on the Trenton Thunder's team?
Yeah, I think there's no question about it. I think it's obviously always easier to move up with the players that you've grown a rapport with and kind of know what to expect from certain guys and have seen them either succeed or fail in certain situations. Obviously, when Bobby Mitchell came over here in 2016, he came over for a completely different organization. So he kind of came in blind, didn't know any of the staff, didn't know any of the players. So you go into your first spring training, you're kind of not only learning the guys that you're going to have on that team, but you're trying to learn everybody in the system, trying to get acquainted with your coaching staff, trying to get acquainted with the guys you're going to work with every day. So Jay Bell definitely has an advantage, having had a year with the core that he's probably going to spend a lot of time with this year. Guys like Nick Solak and Jeff Hendricks and Josh Rogers and Albert Abreu, guys like that are probably going to play prominent roles in Trenton here in 2018. He definitely at least has a barometer to go off of based on what he saw out of them in the Florida State League. So it definitely seems like the Yankees have gone in that direction in the last 4 or 5 years. Since this new kind of player development staff has come into play, where definitely seems like they like to not only move managers, but the entire staff up as the players go. To where some of them are even, I know like Marcus Timms was a guy that a lot of the players touted as he moved through the system, and he kind of came up with the Greg Birds and the Tyler Austins and the Gary Sanchez's and Aaron Judges, and they've all praised him over the years to the point now where he's up on the big league staff. So I think they definitely see advantages in moving coaches and managers along with the players that they help develop.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing, and you talked about it a little bit already in your answer there, but as most people have been listening the last few weeks now, I'm the writer here for this Grant Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders, and since you're getting Jay Bell, Bobby Mitchell's coming up to the Rail Riders. So what can you tell me and all the Rail Rider fans out there what to expect about from Bobby Mitchell?
Just looking at Bobby without ever talking to the guy, he just kind of looks like a friendly, happy-go-lucky guy, and that's pretty much what he is. I mean, he's got a wealth of baseball knowledge. He's one of the only people in history to have won the Little League World Series, the College World Series, and a Major League World Series. So the guy's a winner. He's been around winning teams his entire life. He's a guy who's played in the major leagues with the Dodgers, the Expos. So he's got major league experience. He was never an all-star player. He was more of a bench guy, role-playing type of guy. But he's spent the last pretty much 25 years as pretty much like an outfield, base-running, roving guy for different organizations. Kind of started off with the Red Sox as a roving guy, went over to the Angels organization and actually managed for a year in their system. He actually managed a few guys that are up in the big leagues now that give him a lot of credit as far as base running and stuff. Reggie Willits, he managed Reggie Willits, who's obviously up in the big league team now as a coach. Bobby actually managed him as a player when he was in the Angel system. Reggie speaks highly of him and the way he goes about his business. But he's a guy who's going to work with the outfielders a lot. He takes a lot of pride in that, takes a lot of pride in base running, because those were his bread and butter things when he was a roving guy. But as far as the media goes, he's super accessible. You're never going to get one-word answers. Likes to tell stories, likes to go on. Sometimes you're going to wish he wouldn't go on, to his credit, but you won't find a better guy around the system. He's going to be super accessible, super mellow. Very rare that he shows frustration or anger, but when a player doesn't give max effort or doesn't run out a ball, you're going to know about it. You'll see his frustration, and he'll make it known. That's the thing. A lot of people look at him and think that he's maybe a little soft, but he's anything but. When something doesn't go the way that he sees fit, and if something isn't being carried out the way a major leaguer should and the way that he thinks an organization should, he'll let them know about it. There was a highly documented incident last year. I think it was in the first month of the season, obviously, and that was the big Gleyber mania era when Gleyber debuted in Trenton last year, and Bobby thought that Gleyber didn't give max effort running out of ball, and he pulled him in the fifth or sixth inning of a game, and everybody's like, "Oh, is Gleyber hurt? Is Gleyber this, Gleyber that?" And he made no bones about it that he pulled the top prospect in the organization because he didn't run out of ball. So he'll definitely let you know if there's something that he thinks needs to be corrected in order to make you the best big league guy you can. So you should definitely enjoy Bobby. The fans up in Scranton will enjoy Bobby. I know a lot of those fans up there are super passionate. It's a quiet city, a lot of hardworking blue-collar people who come out, and I think they'll respect the job that Bobby does because he's pretty much like a blue-collar guy who's had to earn this position in the organization, and I know he's super happy to get the opportunity to move up to AAA.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say myself, I'm very much looking forward to getting to know Bobby and getting to work alongside of him in that regard. I definitely am going to miss Pedrique. He was a great manager down there. He was pretty accessible himself. So I'm glad to hear that the fans up here will get a good manager who seems to really know the Yankee way. And then lastly, in terms of Trenton news, we talked about it last week, but a Thunder icon passed away last week in the form of their bat dog Derby. So I just wanted to give you a few moments to say something about Derby. You wrote a great piece for our website on it, and just want to turn it over to you on that.
Yeah, obviously the passing of Derby, not unexpected. Didn't look well last year. You could tell he was showing his age, and I didn't know the ins and outs of his cancer diagnosis. I didn't know he was officially sick, but you could kind of tell just kind of by looking at him. He slowed down. He didn't really have the motor that he used to. So you kind of had a little bit of an inkling that something was up, and didn't really think it would come this quick. I mean, I didn't think he would pass over the winter. I thought we'd see him here again this spring. But like you kind of said, he's more than just a dog. He means a lot to that organization and the fans. He's an identifiable piece of the fabric of that franchise, following in the footsteps of Chase, obviously, who kind of started this whole bat dog phenomenon. And he kind of carried in those footsteps after Chase. And obviously now Chase, Derby's son, Rookie, is around to kind of carry the tradition. It was definitely heartbreaking, though, to find out for sure, as I kind of wrote firsthand in that piece that I mean, I had a hard time putting that together, to be completely honest with you. It's, as a guy who grew up with pets and you kind of grow to love them, it's almost like you spend as much time at that ballpark in the spring and summer months as you do with your family and you're at home. And that kind of becomes like your summer family in a sense. And obviously writers and media get there before fans, and they're kind of behind the scenes, roaming through the offices and stuff like that. And I can't tell you how many times where you just kind of randomly see two golden retrievers like walking through the office, walking through the clubhouse, and kind of just laying there. And I don't know many humans who would walk past a golden retriever and not give it attention and not stop for a minute or two and want to kind of pat it on the head and give it a belly rub. And Eric Lipsman, who's been an executive with the Thunder pretty much since their inception, he owns the dogs, and obviously he was the owner of Derby. And his office is kind of located just beyond the clubhouse. And he's had this brown leather chair in his office as long as I've been there, for now going on 7 years. And usually by the end of the night, when I walk through that office to go back up to the press box, and he'll have the door to the office cracked open, and you could just, most nights both dogs would be just dead asleep on the couch, pooped from a long night of catching bats and kind of rummaging with the fans throughout the concourse and stuff like that. But it's definitely going to be weird to peek in there and only see one dog now. It's definitely going to be a strange transition. But he lived a long, happy life. He was well taken care of and well loved. And I know that Rookie will kind of carry in the footsteps of his father as we kind of mourn and move on.
For sure. And from somebody who's actually I've never been to a Trenton Thunder game. I'm hoping to change that this year and be able to experience, what that's like. So definitely we all mourn the passing of Derby. Definitely, an important part of the Thunder organization, and he'll be missed. And they'll go from there this year. But the one thing I will urge our listeners and people who are watching is to go to the website and check out Matt's story on Derby. It was a very great piece, very moving. You could definitely tell that, you had some passion there. And, like you said, you're definitely an animal lover. One of my favorite parts of being Facebook friends with you is all your pictures of your cat Glaber. So,
yeah.
So definitely go check that out. So now shifting over to Major League news, the Yankees did not acquire Gerrit Cole like everybody thought they would. There were moments where it seemed like it was a done deal, and there were moments where it seemed like it was never a done deal or never a deal at all. I've never seen anything go so back and forth as this trade has. But he was finally traded to the Houston Astros. For Gerrit Cole, the Pirates will receive from the Astros third base prospect Colin Moran, Major League starter Joe Musgrove, and right-handed pitcher, relief pitcher Michael Feliz. Some other notes that I saw: John Heyman tweeted out that the Pirates wanted either Frazier or Andujar from the Yankees, but they did want Andujar more. And the Yankees said that despite our belief where Frazier and Adams would be going in the deal, the Yankees actually told them that they could have one of Frazier or Adams, but not both. So keeping all of that in mind and talking about the package a little bit, Ricky, we'll start with you. How do you feel the package that Pittsburgh got compares to what they could have gotten from the Yankees?
I was surprised the package was as low as it turned out to be. I mean, the Astros are a team that are probably a little bit more desperate than the Yankees to get Gerrit Cole. They're not desperate, but Dallas Keuchel leaving for free agency next year potentially. Houston does need that top-of-the-line pitcher, so it made sense that they were the team that maybe was a little bit more aggressive than the Yankees were in this situation. I'm not surprised that the Pirates didn't really want Clint Frazier because they do have Austin Meadows, and they need the spot that they're trading from McCutchen to put Meadows in, not exactly Frazier. And the Yankees can't really trade Andujar until they know what's going on at third base, whether they re-sign Todd Frazier, they get Mike Moustakas, they get Machado next year, or if Peter Angelos decides to trade him to the Yankees, which will never happen, but you never know. Plus, I just think Brian Cashman has his price. He didn't want to meet it, and Houston at least found a way to upgrade. I think it only hurts the Yankees from the standpoint that it sort of feels like an arms race now at the Astros, and they made their rotation that much more deeper.
Yeah. And Matt, I'll toss this over to you. Do you feel like if the Yankees had acquired Cole as opposed to the Astros, the pieces that would have gone over maybe would have had a higher ceiling than what they did get?
I think this deal is a case of taking more maybe bona fide, usable, serviceable quality over quantity. I think they chose to go with the quantity and took the boat of 3 or 4 players who the 4 of them may never turn out to be all-star players, but guys you could start, guys who put up nice little seasons and are serviceable players. But I think if they would have held out and maybe taken the Yankees deal and gone for a Frazier or an Adams or an Andujar and taken one of those guys, I think any 3 of those guys probably has a higher ceiling than anybody that the Pirates got back in the deal from the Astros. So I think it's kind of a case of, did you want the 3 or 4 guys who are okay, you could get 4 players, or do you want the one guy who could be an all-star game-changing type player? And I think the Pirates opted to take the return at this point in the rebuild to take the quantity over the quality. And I think that's what they opted to do.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree with you on that one. I feel like there was a point where the Yankees publicly said that they were ending trade discussions for Gerrit Cole, and that put the Pirates in a spot where they kind of couldn't wait it out anymore and took the best deal that was left. Now, Joe, the one thing I wanted to ask you, touching more so along the lines of, who was off, like that Andujar was off limits and Chance Adams was, it was one or the other between him and Frazier. What do you think about that? Does that surprise you at all?
No, not really, because with Andujar, I'm not surprised because he's been really coming into his own, especially offensively. He does need to work, obviously, on his defense and his footwork, but he has a good arm at third. And also, as Ricky mentioned, they still have a big hole at third. So rather than trade away a big piece like Andujar, who has tremendous upside, they want to make sure. They want to see what Andujar has, because also if you can develop Andujar into the starting third baseman, that would also go a long way in helping with their payroll goals as well. So, as many of these prospects actually hit, that will get them closer to their luxury tax goal and getting under that luxury tax limit so that, they can do all the things that they're planning to do in the future.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, because right now the most important thing for them is to be able to stay under that luxury tax. Probably even more than acquiring a starting pitcher, just because of what's looming next year. And speaking of the luxury tax and how they're trying to stay under that, there was also reports about whether or not the Yankees made an offer to Yu Darvish. Now the Yankees say they didn't. Yu Darvish said that they did, and that the only wrong reporting was that the numbers were incorrect. They said that it was 7 years, $160 million. I don't believe that, only because I feel like Darvish would have taken that on the spot. I've heard the Yankees feel like he's going to end up getting like somewhere south of $100 million. So what do you guys think about that? We'll start with Matt there. Do you feel like, the Yankees, maybe they did make him an offer that high or not? And more importantly, do you think they should sign him at all? Given what it will take even at the $90 million price?
I don't for a second believe that they made an offer that high, particularly with the years. I don't think Brian Cashman in his right mind would offer any pitcher 7 years, whether it's Yu Darvish or anybody else. I think those days are gone in terms of giving starting pitchers that amount of years in a deal. I think that they probably would be more comfortable giving him that amount of money on a shorter deal. But I can't see them committing 7 years to a starting pitcher in any capacity. I obviously believe that they're involved in this thing. I think they'd like to get him under their terms, kind of like we just talked about in the Gerrit Cole deal. I think that there is room for anybody, but I think it's going to be on the Yankees' terms, and they're kind of not go off their course and go. They're not going to go over budget. They're not going to go over the luxury tax. They're not going to trade guys that they're not comfortable with trading. They're not going to delve money out that they're not comfortable giving. They're not going to give out the years that they're not comfortable giving. But if the Yankees and Darvish could kind of mutually agree to a deal that they both think is fair, I think the Yankees would pounce on it. They could use them. I think he would be a welcome addition to the staff. But keeping that luxury tax goal in mind that Joe just talked so much about, they are hell-bent on staying under that tax. And to sign him to a deal that you would, even if you take that 7-year 160 that you threw out there, even if you go somewhere and meet halfway on that deal, if you want to stay under that luxury tax, push comes to shove, you're going to have to move salary that you already have committed off the books somehow, whether it's moving Ellsbury and eating a chunk of that and dumping that onto somebody else, or throwing in a prospect along with Ellsbury to have somebody take on the whole contract, or I know the idea of moving a David Robertson maybe to clear that salary off, which I think would be a bad move, but I think he's a big important part of what you're trying to do next year. But obviously that's an option. So I think before they go anywhere with Yu Darvish, if they're going to commit even a decent contract to him, if they are true to their word and want to stay under that luxury tax, they're going to have some kind of deal ahead of that in order to fit him under their budget.
Yeah. And Joe, do you think it makes sense for the Yankees to sign Darvish in that aspect?
Well, I mean, I can see if they could come to like a 1 or 2 year agreement with him, perhaps. I can't see them, giving him 7 years. I mean, he's 31 right now. He's going to be 32 in August. He's had the Tommy John surgery. He had back issues with the Dodgers last year. I think it would be a little bit foolish to commit to him more than a year or two at the most at this point, because also you have a lot of guys coming up behind him. If you think of Chance Adams, Justice Sheffield, Albert Abreu, Domingo Acevedo, guys like that, who you want to make sure there's a potential spot for him as well. So you don't want to overcommit to somebody like Darvish, and also with his injury history and his age, I just think it's too much of a risk to go beyond a year or two.
Yeah, and you make a really great point there. Ricky, I'll let you answer this one. Do you think that it's worth signing Darvish, considering the players that the Yankees have coming up in like Domingo Acevedo, Chance Adams? Do you think it's worth signing Darvish and blocking those guys?
No, not at all. And I don't think that Darvish is the perfect answer to this rotation. Brian Cashman's only going to spend that kind of money on pitching if it's a perfect answer. And maybe the best part of the hot stove has arguably been Yu Darvish's Twitter account, which is pretty awesome throughout. But to me, you can't spend money on that guy when he, in a sense, cost the Dodgers the World Series. And this year in 2018 for the Yankees is probably as close to championship or bust as it's been since they last won the championship in 2009. I mean, this team needs to win. Darvish isn't really that answer. He had some good postseason starts with the Dodgers, but he didn't get it done against a team that he usually did pretty well against in the Astros. As I said earlier, your job is to beat the Houston Astros. And that should be the main goal for them. I think they're fine with letting Jordan Montgomery start, giving a chance, pardon the pun, to Chance Adams, and Justice Sheffield, and the guys that they have coming up in minor leagues. And there's also other options. You can go out there and maybe you get a Lance Lynn, a Jason Vargas, or somebody in the second or third tier of pitching that doesn't cost you much money, because I'm with Matt. You can't trade David Robertson because he's one of those guys that thrives in New York and doesn't really thrive as we saw in Chicago. And you don't really get that a lot in terms of the pressure of New York. So I think Darvish, I would stay away from unless the price really dropped down. But in this market, who knows?
Yeah, for sure. So we are almost out of time to, for the recording. And if for those that have listened, we always like to play some kind of fun little prediction game at the end of our podcast. So that being said, I'm going to throw it to each one of you here. And this week, what I'm going to ask you is, between now and spring training, do you think that the Yankees are going to make another big move that would impact the big league roster? And if so, who do you think? We'll start with Matt.
Ooh, putting me on the spot. I do think there's obviously another move to be made just because there's so many holes as far as infield, third base, second base. I mean, you could very well go with Andahar and Gleyber Torres in those spots if you wanted to. Those are the safe picks. Those are the ones that won't cost you any money. I think there's a move to be made. I honestly don't know where it is, though. I just think that the offseason has been so unpredictable and the market has been so slow to develop that I don't think I could really predict where anybody's going to end up right now. I've honestly been floating that around with a bunch of people on Twitter the last couple of days. I don't know where any of these guys are going. Where's Lorenzo Cain going? Where are all these guys ending up? I mean, there's really I thought Mike Moustakas would have been off the market 5 weeks ago when the offseason started. The more he's out there and the more that the days go by, it just seems like the asking prices and the leverage that some of these guys have goes down a little by little. Even look across town to the Mets. I mean, when the offseason started, you heard Jay Bruce for 5 years, $90 million. Mets weren't even in that conversation. As you know, they don't want to spend any money, and they kind of get him back on a 3-year, $39 million deal, which seems like a lot more manageable and a lot less than you thought a guy who hit over 30 home runs and drove in over 100 runs last year would get. So I think the prices are coming down as the days go by. There's still a part of me that thinks the way the market's developing, it seems like Todd Frazier may have to take a 1-year deal. And if Todd Frazier's going to come in the point where he's going to have to take a 1-year deal, I think his first option would be to go to the Yankees on a 1-year deal. If he had to choose between going to the Mets or the Yankees or somebody like that on a 1-year deal, I think the situation's perfect for him to take that 1-year deal to the point where he could slot in there. You could almost maybe work Andahar into the mix as the season goes on. He's not a guy that you have to commit every single day to. He's a guy who has some versatility. And as we talked about the known health issues with Greg Bird and Tyler Austin, that's a guy you could always throw over to first base in a pinch. He's able to play there. So he would provide some depth at the position, insurance there if you brought Todd Frazier back. So if you had to ask me right now, I mean, I wouldn't put a lot of money on it, but I think if there's a move to be made, I think it's going to be a deal like that, maybe a Todd Frazier or maybe a veteran second baseman on a 1 or 2 year deal that you could get on an affordable rate to keep you under the luxury tax. Maybe a guy like Neil Walker, somebody like that who kind of fits the veteran mold and you don't necessarily have to commit the house to, and they're also expendable where you could throw in a Gleyber or an Andahar and not really hurt their feelings, and you could kind of relegate them to a bench role if need be. So I think there's definitely a sign to be made. I don't know if there's another splashy one like a Giancarlo Stanton deal. I don't think there's anything like that to be made. I don't know that they'd be involved in the Mike Moustakas sweepstakes or anything like that, but I definitely think a guy like Todd Frazier is certainly attainable as we go forward.
Joe, same question.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with everything with what Matt said because, yeah, with at this point in time, I think Cashman will make one more move just to kind of bolster the infield. But as we were talking about with the Stanton deal, nobody saw that coming. So I'm not going to sit here and try to predict a move because that blindsided me pretty huge. And even when the rumors came out, I thought there was no chance it was going to happen. So I think it's more along the lines of maybe signing a veteran. Either for second or third, and then trying to work in guys like Gleyber Torres and Miguel Andahar, and then you can kind of even rotate those two guys between those two positions if you really wanted to. So I think there's one more move to be made at least. To me, the pitching has always been a little bit. I understand why they would want a Gerrit Cole, absolutely, or Yu Darvish, but you had a pretty good rotation last year. I still trust those guys, but obviously with the health, potentially of Tanaka and Sabathia, it would be nice to get another pitcher, and a second-tier starter might be a good move as well.
Ricky, will there be a big move, and who will it be?
Well, if all these big-time free agents go past the Super Bowl, then you never can count out Brian Cashman making pretty under-the-radar moves in February and March. I'm kind of with Matt. It's not going to really move the hot take machine, but I kind of like adding Todd Frazier back. I think he just makes perfect sense in that clubhouse. And if the Yankees are truly dead set on going after Manny Machado next year, they can only really give a third baseman a one-year deal, and Todd Frazier would make sense. I think they did miss out a little bit on a guy like Howie Kendrick. Mm-hmm. I know he did get 2 years from the Nationals. I don't think the Yankees could have gave him 2 years, but he was a perfect guy that he works the count, always puts a good at-bat together, makes contact, can play second, third, even played a little bit of first. He would have been perfect, but I do like Neil Walker because he brings power. I think he would want to play in New York. I think that he's played here before with the Mets, so I think that's a good fit. So I do think they'll address the middle infield. I don't really know about the starting pitching, and I think what you'll want to see over the next couple of weeks is let's see what more of these non-roster invitees. Maybe it comes down to the Yankees get a player on a non-roster invitee, works his way through camp, and maybe makes an impact that way. Maybe that's where Brian Cashman sort of finds that diamond in the rough.
For sure. And since we're in the business of predictions here, I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm going to make a bold prediction and say that Mike Moustakas' price will drop enough to make Cashman want to sign him, maybe get him for like 2 years, or maybe a little bit longer, and then they'll be able to use Andujar as a trade chip for a pitcher, maybe like Archer or Fulmer. So just a little interesting take there. But unfortunately, that is all the time that we do have for tonight. Again, this was the 38th edition of the Pinstriped Prospects Podcast, and that is presented by Velocity 5 Restaurant and Bar, and that's in Sterling, Virginia. As always, thank you for taking the time to listen and watch our show. Don't forget to follow us on our social media sites. That includes Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And also, if you're feeling like we're doing a great job, and I know we all feel that way, don't forget to give us the ever-important 5-star rating for our podcast. Do it on the iTunes and Google Play Store. And if there's anything at all that you would like to hear talked about on our podcast, you can reach out to our managing partner and executive producer of this podcast, Mr. Robert Pinstner, and he can be reached at rob@pinstripeprospects.com. You could also reach out to myself at tromanelli@pinstripeprospects.com, or our usual host, Rob Terranova, at rterranova@pinstripeprospects.com. So I hope I did an adequate enough job filling in for Rob tonight. But so for Matt Kardos, Ricky Keeler, Joseph Dixon, and our managing partner and executive producer of this podcast, Robert Pinstner, I'm Tommy Romanelli, and I wish you all a great day or night. And now that you're all caught up on your Yankee news, you could rest easy.